Welcome to Researcher Revealed. I'm Dr. Rosalind Austin, and this is the podcast where we go behind just the name that's on a paper or conference proceeding, or maybe that social media post that you saw, to get to know the researcher behind the research. On today's episode, we travel virtually down under to Australia and catch up with Dr. Nicola Straiton, or Nick, as she likes to be called. She's a longtime hero of mine. I've seen her research and really admire the work that she does, and I'm so excited about this conversation. Enjoy. Good morning, and welcome to the next episode of Researcher Revealed. On today's episode, we have the very lovely drum roll, please. Nick from Australia, can you please introduce yourself to everybody out there in the wide podcasting YouTube world?
Hi all, and thank you for the drum roll. Always much appreciated. So I am Nick, or Dr. Nicola Straiton. I am in Sydney, Australia, and I am a nurse researcher.
Ah, excellent. Okay. There's so many questions I want to ask you, but I've got to keep focused. So we're going to get the Researcher Rapid 11 straight out of the way, get that done and
Awesome.
dusted so that we can dive into what led you to being a nurse researcher. And I love that you called yourself a nurse researcher. And so I want to get into that as well. But let's put that on a shelf for a minute. Excellent. And let's dive into the 11 questions, find out who you are and how you work.
Thank you.
Are you a Windows or a Mac user?
Windows.
Windows, nice. All the right people are.
Yeah, all the older people are. Shh, not telling anyone.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Oh,
Australia. They really have amazing coffee.
Yeah, that's not an excuse, dude. You said before we pressed record you were from England. You're letting the team down.
I know. Sorry, team.
When you're writing, do you prefer to have music in the background or silence?
Music.
Ooh, nice. Where do you tend to work? At home or at an office?
At an office within a hospital.
Ooh, oh, we have got to dive into that.
Yeah, there's leaks, there's many things. It's fabulous.
Wow, very cool. What time of day would you say you are most productive?
Probably around 7:30 a.m.
So morning, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Morning. Nice. To be precise, with the exact number, of course.
I love it.
Not even AM or PM.
Being like a total detail geek,
yes.
You're not gonna get any
There's the scientist here.
Exactly. What is your favorite referencing management system?
I tend to use EndNote. I've just used it for many years. Feel comfortable with it. When the new releases come out, I find the tutorials pretty easy, and I teach people how to use it. So I think it's always a good little evolution.
Are you a super user of EndNote?
I teach my team. I don't teach more than that, but that's about enough.
Oh, you might have some good top tips there. I might have to hit you up for some good hints there. What about data visualization? Do you have a favorite tool that helps you create your figures, your graphs, your mind maps?
Yeah, I probably use two. The most frequently I use Canva to create, I guess smaller scale or more compact infographics. But I've been doing work such as mind maps. I tend to use Miro.
I think the second person who's said about Miro.
Yeah, it's pretty cool actually, but you can go on forever and ever. It's almost like infinity. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I use a fairly similar. I don't think it's as swishy as Miro, but I use something called draw.io.
Okay. Yeah.
It's an open source platform, so there's no subscription, no membership. And it's similarly you can go on to infinity. They've got a bunch of templates that you can use, or you can just start from scratch. And Unlike PowerPoint, where when you try and connect two boxes with an arrow, it can go horribly wrong. Draw.io doesn't ever go horribly
Oh,
wrong.
wow. Okay, well, this is cool because I was just struggling drawing some fat arrows a moment ago in PowerPoint. So nice to get some clean arrows.
Yeah, I know. Draw.io it's a
Okay.
really good tool. I really like it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Desk snack. If you're sitting at your desk and writing away, do you have a snack or are you not a snacker?
It varies, but probably almonds.
Ooh,
That's my little snack of choice.
nice. Nuts are a popular choice.
I think they just fill you up, which is great.
Yeah, and
Keep you
they've got lots
focused.
of like vitamins and good protein and all
Yeah.
sorts.
I sometimes
Very
get the
cool.
mixed ones with the chocolate in, and obviously that is just
Oh,
the
that's
best.
next
That's a
level. That's when you,
Friday afternoon.
that's a Friday afternoon one. I
Yeah,
love it.
post 7:30 a.m.
Oh, that's brilliant. Love it. When you're planning or organizing, whether that's like not so much your life, but like a paper or a project, are you
Mhm.
a digital planner or are you a pen and paper?
Whiteboard. Yeah, pen and paper.
Whoa!
Whiteboard, which is just pen at the moment, but I have had a play on some digital whiteboards, which I think are pretty cool. And if I get enough research pennies, I may I may install one of those.
Oh, that would be
Yeah,
cool.
it's very
Oh.
CSI. It's very moving around all your boxes, which I just think is truly phenomenal. So, when I'm a grown-up researcher, that's what I would love to have.
It's like one of the things that I didn't ever expect when I started this podcast is I'm developing like a wish list of things to achieve as a grown-up like researcher. So I've got like my own private like researcher bingo card.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And a
I've
bus.
added
I
a
would
digital
also like
whiteboard
a
to the
bus.
square.
Yeah. All the things.
Oh, definitely all the things. Right, two more questions, then we're done.
Okay. Hit me up.
What book are you currently reading?
So I flip-flop between fiction and non-fiction. I
Okay.
don't tend to, if I read a couple of fiction, then I feel like I need to read something serious to be a grown-up again. Right now I am reading The Power by, I think it's Naomi Alderman. I was just looking up her first
And is
name.
that fiction
Yeah.
or not fiction?
Fiction.
Okay. Naomi Alderman.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Always looking for book recommendations. Is it good?
It's good. It's like a little bit of dystopian. If we flipped all things on their head and then women suddenly had power, how would that be in the world? And I guess, I'm interested in, imagine if you could flip the power on its head and many underserved populations suddenly had the power to do things. So yeah, it touches on some of my values.
Yeah. Interesting. Sounds good. I'm going to put it on the list.
Cool.
I'm finishing the last in the series. That is in a weird way, sort of a very dystopian, slightly sci-fi take on
Ah,
academia.
oh, cool. Oh yeah, recommend this, please. What's the title?
So I think so. I'm reading the third one right now, which is the Atlas Complex. They're all called the Atlas something by
Yeah.
Olivier Blake or something. Anyway, it's set in a land where magic exists, and the truly talented magic people every 10 years get invited to this secret society, and in the secret society it's all about research and academia and contributing to the great Alexandrian library, which isn't disappeared, it's just locked in a secret house in London that you have to be magical to
Ah,
get into.
okay.
But it plays on the philosophy of knowledge
Hmm.
and knowledge being power.
Yeah,
And if
yeah, yeah.
knowledge is power, is there too much power? And what happens when you
Mm.
give people power? And what is the cost of power?
Gosh, that's interesting, isn't it?
It's
and then what is
very
knowledge and what is fake news versus, yeah, gosh, that is very, very interesting.
It is it's a bit heavy. It's a
That's
bit
cool
of
though.
you have to like definitely pay attention. But I'm on the third one now, and I'm hoping the author brings it all to a head and wraps it up, and doesn't keep trying to like milk it. But we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
You
when
know,
to
really,
stop. We all have that problem, don't we?
yeah, exactly. But the power sounds a similar sort of theme, but instead of being about magic, it's more about who holds the power. But I'll
Yeah, who
definitely
holds the
put that
power?
on my
Yeah.
my book list.
Same.
Right, last question is, who is a researcher who you admire?
Is it wrong to say your boss, even though you do?
No, there's no such thing as
Okay.
no.
There's no job promotions on the cards, so you know it's I'm not doing this fine for an increase in pay.
Yeah.
It really is my boss, who is Professor Sandy Middleton. So she's a nurse researcher, and she basically turned my interests into a absolute devotion for implementation science. And I am really in the cult of implementation science now. And I guess just to watch what she has achieved as a researcher so humbly, and also what she's managed to build to grow the next generation of clinician researchers, nurse researchers, and many others. So yes, I'm a bit of a fangirl. It's a bit awkward working with her every day. Try to have conversations with the person you inspires you, but you know, we try.
That's what a beautiful thing. Like, oh, I'm so excited to dive into our conversation because the little hints that you said, even in the answers to the Rapid 11, I'm like, oh, there is so much there. I think we're gonna have a hard time keeping this to an hour, but we're gonna give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely intrigued as to why you call yourself a nurse researcher. But before I find out the answer to that, I want to know, back in the day, how did you go from nurse to nurse researcher?
Okay. Well, I'll start with back in the day before I try and give a bit of an answer to why I call myself nurse researcher.
Yeah.
So how did I go from becoming a nurse to a researcher? I guess for me, it's the other way around. So how
Oh,
did I go
okay.
from becoming a researcher to a nurse? Just, you know, we're down under. We like to flip things on their head. So I loved science when I was young, when I was at school. Particularly loved biology and chemistry. Had a chemistry set. Loved blowing things up. Loved my biology teachers because I loved learning about health and the body and science. So kind of had that science brain. But then when I finished school, before I went to university, I actually wanted to go and train to be a nurse. But with some advice from my parents, they said, no, don't do nursing. There's actually, I'm not sure about the career path that may lie ahead if you choose nursing straight out of school or college. Choose science because you like science and you seem to be okay at it. So I chose science. I chose biomedical science as like my first university degree. Still wanted to be a nurse at that point, but you know, thought, okay, let's go and have a go at this, which I did, and I absolutely loved. I can draw many of the anatomical and chemical pathways in the body still. I reckon I could have a good crack at some of them still today. But even when I was doing that degree, there was an element and there were certain modules within the course that were really talking more about application of the science or the clinical evidence into practice. And so I still feel that nursing or, you know, health professional gnawing at me a little bit. Anyway, pushed it away, went to work in science for a little bit. I worked in basic science, doing a lot of, you know, underneath the the flow hood, growing cells and looking at DNA and all that jazz. Worked in that just for a small period, but then I kind of completed my degree, came out as a researcher, but then just didn't feel I wanted to work in that industry. So went off and did some traveling, like all good lost people do, or try a few different jobs. But then when I was actually flying back from doing very fortunate enough to do some backpacking around the world. I was flying back from Australia. I sat next to an older lady on the plane, and she gave me a boiled sweet. And I think this was the start of my beautiful journey into nursing. She said, "What are you going to do now that you're going home back to the UK?" And I said, "I'm going to go back and I'm going to train to be a nurse." So as a researcher, then I became a nurse. So I went back, trained a little bit later in life to be a nurse. But on my first kind of job interview, and even during my nursing training, you know, my first manager said to me, "So where do you see yourself in 5 years?" I mean, as a nurse, I kind of wanted to say alive and not have killed anybody. But I tried to be, again, a grown-up and said, "I hope to be doing something with nursing and research." At that point, I didn't have the words to know what that was, but I knew that I had a science and a research passion. I knew that I wanted to be a nurse. And so how did I become a nurse to a researcher? It stemmed from there then. And I can give you, I can be quiet a moment, or I can tell you the small potted history how I then got to be a researcher, a nurse researcher.
So I think let's fast forward a little bit.
Yeah, great.
So why do you call yourself a nurse researcher? Is that officially your job title?
My job is senior research fellow.
Okay.
That's my title on paper. But I guess I'm a nurse and a researcher. So why do I call myself that? So it's a term commonly used in Australia to mean a person who has the nursing qualification and who has the academic qualifications of a PhD. So it's a common term that we use in Australia, but there have been discussions, and I've been involved in, you know, thinking about this more myself along the lines of nurse scientist, because, you know, nursing is STEM. And so I think we need to understand where we sit. So I love the discussion about this, and it's just trying to situate ourselves.
So your role then is a research role. That's like your bread and butter. You're getting paid to do research as a fellow. Are you working clinically at all, or just purely as a researcher?
I'll answer this then, say more about it. So I have full-time research focused role, but I'm very fortunate enough to work within the Nursing Research Institute, which is a research institute my boss set up, you know, 15 plus years ago, which is embedded in a hospital, in a large hospital in Australia, but has a collaboration with one of our leading universities here, the Australian Catholic University. So I have a 100% research focused role, but I sit within a hospital. And so it's beautiful. It's absolutely utopia. I mean, it's utopia of where, you know, I love working, and, you know, and I'm employed by a university, but it's trying to balance these roles and, you know, embedding researchers within health. Because I don't think as a nurse I ever wanted to leave the clinical setting, but there were just no roles, or very few co-joint roles or shared roles. So I'm fully embedded here. So in terms of, do I do clinical? Again, this is my perspective on it. So you know, I think as a researcher, we are kind of doing clinical work. If we think of senior nurses or executive nurses who may not actually touch a patient, as part of their day-to-day work, but they're certainly thinking about how to deliver care and how to design care and looking at the best outcomes for patients and the clinicians and the nurses. I think I consider myself still clinically practicing because every day I'm looking at what are the research priorities that are important on the ground to clinicians, to hospitals, and designing research with them, for them, and with patients to address many of the clinical priorities. So I guess I see myself as I don't have the role of a nurse manager or a nurse executive, but I still believe that nurse researchers kind of are clinical.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. Like it's like one of my biggest like arguments that I have all the time. And I think even stronger for me because my clinical background before I had my PhD was as a research nurse. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, it's just delivery. You don't do any clinical work. And I'm like, I was running autonomous cardiology clinics where we gave unlicensed drugs. I think that qualifies as clinical. And like it's such a hard thing to describe to people because I'm in the same camp as you. I very strongly believe that research is a clinical skill, and the only thing that I find really challenging is that in the UK anyway, there's currently this war between where does research sit and who's going to value research and who's going to fund those research positions. And how it's all worked is that we have the NIHR, so it's a big research board for the whole country, and they sort of get given a pot of money by the government. They then distribute it various different ways, some around delivery and some around like grants and personal fellowships and PhDs and blah, 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 all of that sort of stuff. So it's like this independent body. And then you have universities and you have hospitals, and then in the middle, since 2008, they've created this term of clinical academic and these people that are supposed to bridge between the two. But the issue that has yet to be really cemented and formalized is how do we fund those clinical academics?
Yes, and I think it's nothing new, is it?
No.
It's been around for almost three or four decades now. This same thing, but I'm glad that it's still being discussed and worked out. In Australia, we look to the NIHR as actually leading the way. In this space, we were very fortunate enough to invite Professor Ruth Endicott out to Australia last year. And, I guess one of the biggest takeaways for me, and I think we're probably maybe be on the same page in some things, she gave a lecture on, if we want to solve the complex health challenges that we have now and that are emergent, we're going to need more clinician researchers. And by whatever profession they have, nurse, doctor, allied health, we need them with their clinical expertise. And in terms of, training them to be research active and, meet those challenges and truly understand some of the challenges we're facing, we really need to grow more. And if you looked at it from a business model perspective, I guess the model we have had to date, where it's predominantly been medical, has done a wonderful job. But even our medical colleagues are, so much work at the moment and, larger patient volumes, that I think it's time to change up the business model. And a smarter business model would be to really provide the opportunities for all healthcare professionals, because everyone looks at health challenges in a slightly different way, and everyone absolutely has a different skill set. So, when I think of it from a business model and an equity opportunity, it's a no-brainer. I think we all need to get involved in research.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I think, that equality and diversity, the more people that you provide a supported role, a supported space for them to do research, then the more voices you have in that choir, the more beautiful the song. Where like if you only have like, yes, a male choir only or a female choir only can be really spectacular, but how much cooler would it be if you had every gender, if you had lots of different people from like, because the more diversity that you add, the more color that comes from it. And I've definitely benefited, like in my own PhD. Like I had like multidisciplinary supervisory team. So I had a sociologist, I had a cardiologist, and I had nurses. And that cardiologist and the sociologist definitely changed the nature of the work that I did, the quality of the work that I did, compared to other colleagues who I saw who only had a single profession on their panel.
It definitely opens up more opportunities, and I think it opens up opportunities to have more impactful research. You know, I'm a big advocate for trying to do multi-site or multi-center research studies, because you can bet your bottom dollar that if one hospital's having it, another hospital's having the problem. So I think having definitely a range of people on your team just helps you think a little bit broader.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. Okay, so understand why you call yourself nurse researcher now. I think we'll shelf the exact journey, how you went from qualified nurse researcher for later, because I'm just looking at the time.
Conscious of the time. Ask me the pointy questions. No, perfect. Thank you.
So you're nurse researcher. I think you finished your PhD. And you're researching mainly around implementation science and cardiovascular, or is that where you are now, or were you always in that sort of sector?
So I've always been in cardiovascular disease. In particular, heart valve disease has been my area of focus. I then started to kind of explore implementation science during the latter part of my PhD, because I started to think about, how do we get this evidence into practice? What does it mean? How can we use it? And then I've kind of brought the focus of my PhD was also looking at frailty. So I'd say my research program now is cardiovascular disease, frailty, and implementation science.
Okay, cool. Within heart failure disease. All right. So you finished your PhD. You've always been sort of like focusing on cardiovascular disease and switching now a bit to more. How did you navigate that very interesting, trying to stay positive, postdoc period?
Yeah, good question. I'm still navigating. Still navigating. Soon to be busking if all the research grants don't come in, I'm sure. So how did I navigate it? To be honest, when I finished my PhD, for the first,
just I think for 1 second. When did you finish your PhD? Just to give context.
March 2023.
So, okay.
So just over 2.5 years, I think we're coming up to. I left my PhD and tried to get a job. I was really looking for a postdoc somewhere. Would love a postdoc, you know, in the areas that I was interested in, but would have been happy to take close to anything just to pay the bills and use my skills a little bit more. And I didn't actually. I applied for a couple of positions, but didn't actually get them. So I made the scary choice to go and leave health and academia and go and get a job in industry for the first, I think it was the first 6 or 8 months after my PhD. I went to work for a company that was focused on clinical trial design and the use of AI.
Okay.
So it really brought together lot of work, a lot of I guess my skills I know about research and clinical trials and AI. I got to work with data analysts and AI specialists, and that kind of appeals to me, looking at, thinking of what we can do in that space. Then I was fortunate enough to, continue to apply for a few more roles. And that was when I got another 1-year contract as a research fellow. And then after that 1-year contract, I managed to get a grant, which has really led me into where I'm at the stage I'm at now. So it's very higgledy-piggledy along the way, but I feel like I'm in the last year or so just bedding down kind of where I am now in my post-doc journey.
So again, for context, because you're in Australia,
Yes.
is that experience of sort of higgledy-piggledy, I'll say, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, is that
Yes.
normal postdoc, or is that like, I don't mean this negatively, but like, was
No,
the
gosh. Yeah.
fact that you didn't step into a role a luck thing? So like where you were located, your the opportunities, this just with timing, things like that, or is that status quo?
I think it's the majority
Okay.
of the outcomes. So I was fortunate enough last year to host a national symposium, which was focused on early to mid-career nurse and midwifery researchers, and we got
Yeah.
to hear many people's journeys, and we looked at some of the data around early and mid-career research, nurse and midwifery researchers. And I think the majority of them, from what I understand, and we ran a national survey, just kind of, they don't, it's hard to find the position that you want because there are not many positions in the postdoc years. It's hard to find a role as a nurse researcher, or my midwifery colleague said, as a midwifery researcher in hospitals, because hospitals don't know how to employ us or what we do. So you could go back to a hospital, of course, and be a nurse or a midwife, but to try and combine both of them is quite tricky.
Yeah.
Or then you can, of course, go to academia, and there are teaching roles, but again, there are not many teaching roles or academic roles. And, they all come with slight trade-offs. So I think everyone scrambles around to try and find, one, a job to pay the bills, and two, something that hopefully aligns with what their interests are.
Like, it's so refreshing to hear that, because I think being in the postdoc era myself, and I'm a little bit ahead of you, not by much, because I finished in October 22.
Okay.
Like, I find, like, as a nurse compared to other health professionals, and I'm not talking medics, because they've got their own unique challenges, and I've got friends
Absolutely. Yeah.
who are trying to do research as medics, and they're having, I think sometimes nurses and allied health professionals look at medics as being like, oh, they've got it all sorted, and I'm like, have you talked to one recently? But I find nurses, compared to like my colleagues who are physios or clinical scientists or OTs or whatever other kind of health profession, I find nurses, in my experience anyway, seem to really struggle with that postdoc era more than most other professions. So like colleagues of mine who are physios, they're like, the fact they've achieved a PhD, it's like held up, it's celebrated, it's
Yes.
let's
Yeah.
progress you. My friends who are like health behavior, health psychologists, they can open up consultancies, and they are able to progress. Pharmacists, they can convert a lot easier into industry, but I find nurses, like, you run up against like the three main outlays that post PhD you're told to pursue as a nurse require exactly what you just said, some degree of trade-off. So academic and doing teaching means, leaving clinical behind, potentially even taking a pay cut.
Yes. Yeah.
having to adopt somebody else's research priorities rather than your own research priorities. Hospital, they're like, yeah, sure, you can do it, but we're not going to pay you for that, even though it's one of the nurse pillars. We
Yes, yeah.
won't give you any protected time, but we'll love it when you publish and we'll talk about how awesome we support you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then industry, they don't really know what to do with nurses.
Yeah. They
And
don't
so it's
know
this
what your skills
real
are.
tricky puzzle in
Yeah.
that postdoc period. Um, and it's not unique to nurses, but that's what I know. And a lot of people I've spoken to, that seems to be really, really challenging for nurses. So, what do you think the key is? How do we, as that mid to early career researcher, how do we
Mm-hmm.
make it successful?
Don't know if I have all the answers, but again, just from I think it is really tricky, and I think we after the National Symposium, we produced the Sphere Nursing and Midwifery Early to Mid-Career Researcher roadmap for nurses and midwives. And, you know, roadmaps are great, and I'm not plugging my own work, of course I am, but you know, at least from that, we kind of distilled some key thinking, and this was done with, you know, a whole group of nurses and midwives, early to mid-career from across Australia, many of our funders, a lot of policymakers, a lot of senior directors of nursing and midwifery within our health setting, and Professor Ruth Endicott and a few others. So first of all, recognition as researchers. We just have to own that we are researchers, and so we have to own it as the individuals. I still, you know, many even nurse and midwifery researchers now struggle to what their identity is. So I think there's an identity ownership for ourselves. We have to recognize us as rigorous researchers. You know, we have the highest level of research qualification, so we have to see ourselves as that and shout about it. I think for our organization, recognizing nursing and midwifery researchers is critical. So standalone recognition of those, you know, regular communication about their achievements. And I'm not trying to split the professions at all, but we do have to look at the evidence on this. And we know just nurses and midwives, despite being the largest healthcare professional workforce, receive the least opportunities and the least recognition. So I am all for equity, but let's get there. And then when we get there, then we can move forward. So I think recognition as researchers, our organizations need to do this, and they need continually to do this. And then they need to think about how can we reward that? What does that look like? You know, a clap didn't do it a few years ago, and a piece of paper is not going to do it for our fridge these days. I think rewarding researchers to, you know, take part in additional training, so the small funding pots or go to conferences. Collaboration as partners. I'm literally speaking from the roadmap. I don't have it in front of me, but it's embedded in my soul from being very humble enough to run that national symposium. So collaboration as partners, what do I mean there? I mean collaboration as partners. So if we think about hospitals or healthcare institutions and academia, they need to see us as equal partners across both of them. We're not being sold to the highest bidder. We are, you know, trying to bring high quality evidence into clinical practice. So how can we be seen as partners across all organizations? And then what can we do to develop those opportunities? We see some, you know, small, you just mentioned it a moment ago, who owns what and who's going to pay for what and which part is what. So I think we need to even that out a little bit if we want to truly be seen as partners. And then I think the last recommendation we had from our roadmap was looking at capacity and capability. So we, you know, that recommendation specifically came out from, in academia, you may have a 40-40-20 split of your role, where research is only 20% of your role. So how do we get more research time? What does that look like as you go from those early days of research up to the top? Because you can't have 20% research time if you're a mid-career researcher. But you'd be surprised how many nurse and midwifery researchers still are struggling to discuss. We need to move from 20% to 30% to 40%. And then, you know, thinking about in our healthcare setting, I've got a few colleagues, and you may have as well, who have co-joint roles, or the early clinician researchers and nurse researchers. How do they get time in practice? Because I think you're right. Hospitals, they love us. They want us part of it. They, have bought in and they can see the benefit, but still not releasing the time or giving us the capacity. And then capability, I believe nurses are really behind, and you can see that in many things. We haven't had the same training, and even when we come out of our PhD, we may not have run large scale multi-site clinical trials. So how do we pair nurse researchers up with, say, biostatisticians, health economists, AI specialists, or data analysts? So I think it's going to take deliberate action to do that. You almost have to say, okay, biostatistician embedded within a hospital, maybe 1 day a week is dedicated to research led by nurses, for example, tangible small things. And I think sharing these ideas, like you and I sharing some ideas of what's working in different countries, I think this is the critical mass of how we can all apply it. And I want to create FOMO. I think we need FOMO, What's your country doing versus what's our country doing? How are your nursing researchers doing? Let's do it, and let's have a little competition.
I love that. I love that idea of let's create FOMO, because I think it's such a major driver. And I think I don't know, I've argued about this for quite a few times with different people, that, like, although in the UK, within the nursing model, they've got, like any advanced nurse practitioner, they've got this, you need the four pillars. They're addicted to pillars of leadership, autonomy, research, education.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I just think, like, so much of what you've just said just stings to my soul, because I think nurses have so long been trying to get people to see the value, that they're like, the best way of doing that is let's diversify and do everything.
Yes, yeah.
And if you think about it, if you stop for a minute and say, okay, as one person, like, I've read some job descriptions for like full-time or even part-time roles, and I'm like, it's not humanly possible. Like, and
nurses are excellent, but sometimes, like, even best of us, you just can't juggle it. On normal, you do a good job.
Well, and that, I think, is the crucial thing. And I think that ties into that last point you made of being like, nursing in general is a bit behind. And the even when you finish a PhD, depending on the country that you do your PhD in, there's a wide standard of what that means. And how that then translates into the researcher that person will become. And I'm not saying one is good, bad, or otherwise, but unless we start to really own who we are as nurses, and who the research that we can do and the value that we can bring, and instead of trying to be a jack of all trades, be like, no, actually, if you support me to do this job, then watch me fly. And I kind of think, like, I wonder, within this early career researcher model, like, everybody sits around and scratches their head and wonders where everybody with a PhD goes.
Yeah.
And I'm going, guys, I can
hit me up.
I can
I'm
tell
here.
you make it impossible to succeed. And in fact, in a weird way, the model should be flipped upside down, because in order to get people to succeed, it's like this Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And you lose so many people because the Hunger Games relies on luck, fortune, and timing to a huge degree. And then you manage to score 20%. And then if you manage to do your full-time job plus your second full-time job plus your research job that you say only takes 20%, but takes another full-time job for 5 years, then you can get 30%. And I often sit around and scratch my head and go like, how can we get people to see that actually, if you want to increase capacity, straight out of a postdoc is have a protected 5-year period for a PhD nurse researcher, pay them money and say your expectations for the next 5 years are exactly as you outlined. I want you to start to own your identity, build a brand around you. I want you to get institutional buy-in, build a collaborative team around you. I want you per year at minimum 1 to 2 grants being submitted. That's your goal. Whether or not you get them, nobody cares. And we're going to give you the support of a biostatistician, a methodologist. We're going to help you make that competitive application rather than you trying to figure it out solo. And with a couple of mentors help. What does that look like? Instead of having us like scrabbling around, killing ourselves, doing it in our spare time, and like submitting and having to go through like people when I say this, they look at me like really sad. I'm like, no, you have to phrase it that way. Otherwise you will go crazy. Like I live on an island of rejection.
Yes, yeah.
And because I live on the island of rejection is normal, so it's not as hard.
No,
right?
It's not as hard. But it could be improved, I think, if we did have more buy-in and we had, more balanced roles and more recognition. I do think we could change up. So in Australia, just a stat that I don't know what the stats are in the UK, but nurses and midwives receive less than 5% of competitive research funding. So that's just wild to me. The largest healthcare profession, you have the research expertise, receive that little funding. And so, I think we've got a benchmark there. So that's a benchmark in the sand. How are we going to increase that from 5 to 6%? And I think everybody plays a part. The funders are healthcare organizations, the academia, and ourselves. Like we all do play a part. And look, I guess a big thing for me, and the bit which I think could be the secret weapon, or the secret ingredient, thinking about patients and the public involvement. So we conducted some research here asking patients, well, first of all, sharing examples of nurses leading research, involved in all different ways, but leading research, nurses and midwives. And patients just didn't really understand it. They didn't understand nurses do research. Nurses lead hugely impactful lives that save millions of lives and reduce millions of healthcare costs. And we know that because it's published. For every $1 research funding invested in nurse and midwifery-led clinical trials, it's a $5 return investment. We have that evidence. That's nothing new. But, patients and the public, I don't think they may even know that nurses and midwives lead research. And I think that could be the next big groundswell because, we spend so much time with patients. Imagine if we had patients on our side shouting about these achievements or what we could do. Something I've been thinking about. I just have to figure out how to operationalize this, and I'm just wondering if more of these partnerships with patients, and I love patient-led research. Been a huge advocate in this space for a long time and done some work in this space, but this could be the beautiful sweet spot as an opportunity for us.
I think you could be onto something there. I think getting more voices to stand up for us. I don't remember who said this, but I found it really, really powerful. It was a talk somewhere around that I'd gone to around equality, and I don't know how much research was behind it, but it really stuck with me. And I've had examples in my own personal journey that has proven this to be true. Is if you want something to grow, if you want something to get a chance, the best advocate is somebody who doesn't match the group that you're trying to advocate for.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty, and that's probably a lot of tech. There's probably in the tech world that happens, I imagine, quite a bit.
Well, I think it's everywhere. Like you think about like if you have a female trying to stand up for female things,
Sure.
then they get blasted as crazy or whiny or whatever. Well, history says that time and time again. But if you get a non-female to advocate for a female, all of a sudden things start to happen.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And it's the same no matter what sort of speciality you look at.
It's true. It's true.
An
Even for
advocate,
underrepresented populations. Sorry for talking.
I think like allies and allyship, regardless of what you're looking for, that is the key. And whether that's a patient voice, or whether that's a consultant voice, or whether that's a physiotherapy voice, or whether that's a whoever
Completely
voice,
agree.
but having an ally within your speciality is key, but then also outside of your speciality, I think that's really key. So I think you're really onto something with patients.
Research allyship, then. Let's claim it together. That's all right. We've got a new coin. Now we need to a new term. We need to operationalize it.
I like it. Research allyship. I might call that the episode.
Yeah, done.
Done and dusted. Like I think it's such an important thing, and I think, like, I will ask you to send me in an email. I'll ask you to send me a link to that roadmap, because I think a lot of people will find that really, really valuable. And I'll put it for everybody who's listening or watching. Check out the episode description, because there'll be lots of resources in there, including that roadmap around building research capacity for nurses and midwives that was created nationally in Australia, as an excellent resource if you're out there and listening. But I think, like, having these conversations can be hard and they can be tricky, because it requires you to be brave and be like, what's happening is good, but dare to dream better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And push yourself. I've told you who my boss is, who is kind of one of my heroes. Sandy always says to me, when I think about doing it, locally or in one hospital, when I'm thinking about research projects, she always said, how about we go national? Which, there's nowhere in the middle. It's always that big. So I love the idea of when you think of something, and we're reaching out across countries here. This is just push yourself a little bit bigger, and I think it will increase chances of funding or getting research up and running.
No, definitely. And I think that going bigger, that reaching out across borders is going to be key to nurses being seen. And also, like, nurses supporting each other and pushing each other's research. So, like, some of the international collaborations that people that I've spoken to, who it's considered normal to do an RCT in their PhD. And
I love that.
I love it.
I love it.
But like, when I look around me and I see what my PhD looked like in the UK versus what a lot of other PhDs look like, I feel really, really fortunate, because my supervisor pushed me to do multiple methods. We didn't go as far as an RCT, but the fact that I've done multiple methods already in the UK sets me on a different level compared to a lot of other researchers. And that's not to say that it's bad or not valuable, but I think we need to raise the bar. We need to raise the standard of research that nurses are doing through those collaborations, in order to have those allyships be built. Because I forget which guest it was, but somebody else said that, like, if in the Researcher Revealed podcast, if all we ever do as nurses is just describe what happens, it's taking it the next step. So what are you going to do about the fact that it's terrible to have an illness? And how are you then going to implement it? How are you going to change? So that whole research cycle, and a lot of nurses get stuck at the description and they don't manage to get past that.
Yeah.
And I think,
which is such a change from, you know, how we practice clinically when we start. So if you give a nurse tomorrow, you know, a new protocol or a new model of care, and you say, okay, we need this implemented in the next 2 weeks, and we start auditing then, the nurses will think of the most innovative and wonderful strategies to get that new protocol into practice, or new way of doing things, absolutely out of the box. But suddenly when we get to the research, that we seem to have lost our skills. And this is why I absolutely think nurses involved in implementation science, getting the evidence into practice, this is where our core skill lies. And then I think, you know, designing trials around that. Sure, training can come for the methodology around clinical trials, but to be honest, the foundations are built, and I think we just need to realize that.
I love that. I love it. Because I think it's so true. And you're right. Like, I think nurses, and it goes back to like what you said at the beginning of the roadmap, is nurses don't understand their own power.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we're like the sleeping giants. And so I think nurse plus research equals sleeping giant. And I think when you wake us all up, I don't know, this is how I see us all. We just have, and I think we are, and I think the rise is changing, and now it's time to really just harness that. Give us a go. The business model might make sense.
Watch this space. I could talk to you forever, but we've been going now for almost an hour. So by the time I do my intro and stuff, we better wrap it up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Before we say bye, though, top tip for that nurse out there who is just research curious. At whatever stage in her education or training or clinical experience she is, why should she wake up and become an awake giant?
An awake giant. I think we were chatting about it earlier. You know, if you've ever done an audit as a nurse, you're probably a researcher. And that means you've probably spotted a pattern in care that could be improved. And so if you see that and you think, I wonder if that could be done differently, then you've already got the researcher within you. And now become a researcher, because it teaches you those rigorous methods on how to test that out a little bit more and a little bit more effectively. And what does that lead to? That leads to saving millions of lives. So we can do so much at the bedside. And I think this is our playground as nurses. The bedside is where we start, and then we take it to the lab.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. We start at the bedside and then we take to the lab to save millions of lives. Oh, that's wow. Thank you so much, Nick. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel very, very honored that you were kind enough to give me so much of your time.
It's really, really great. Thank you so much.
No worries. Everybody out there who's listening, definitely remember, check that episode. Oh, and before I forget, if you have a question for Nick, drop it in the YouTube comment section, because that's the best way that I'll actually find it and can make sure Nick gets it and gets you an answer. If you put it on social media, it might get lost.
It should most certainly will get lost.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you again in 3 weeks' time. Don't go away. Up next, we have the top 3 takeaways from this week's podcast by Dr. Rosalind Austin. They say never meet your heroes, and I'm going to dispute that. Like I said in the intro, I do admire Nicola Straiton. Her voice online, the research that she does, is really inspiring. And I was so excited when she very kindly agreed to take part and be a guest on this podcast. And I enjoyed this conversation so much. And it was fascinating. We got a little bit brave. We delved into the tricky postdoc era, and what that looks like. She's about a year ahead of me, finished her PhD a little bit later than I did. So it was really interesting to hear about her journey and what works and the things that she's doing to actively advocate for an improved postdoc journey for nurses and midwives. So you're probably wondering, what are my top takeaways? For me, the first one is that although she's UK born, she's completely entered into the upside down world of Australia. And she shared how her own research journey went the wrong way around. So she actually was a researcher before she was a nurse, and it was her love of research and her desire to be more involved within clinical practice that took her from being within the biomedical world into the nurse world, and then allowing her to combine that research with nursing. So I really like that. The upside down way of becoming a nurse researcher. But I think the truth is like, if I really stop for a minute and think about everybody that we've had on the podcast, is I'd actually say, like, it's not like everybody's journey is unique, and doing it upside down or backwards, where you're a researcher first and before you become a clinician in order to do research, is it's not that unusual. And I think it's something to really remember for those of you who are starting on your journey, but maybe those of you who are listening, who are in more senior positions, is that actually when we're thinking about building opportunities for career pathways for nurses and midwives, and possibly even some allied health professionals, is to remember that a lot of us have taken a more complicated journey to become nurses. And so that then means different things for how we want our career to progress. More about that later. Second takeaway is that reassurance for everybody out there listening that the postdoc era is a really challenging time. And even in places where you have amazing and supportive bosses, as Nick says she does, you know, and as great as the work that she's doing, she has no job permanency. She's reliant on bringing in grants in order to sustain that job or that fellowship. And it raises questions about how we, the world, to go forward. If we want to build more health researchers, how do we support this early stage in their career, which isn't really that early for a lot of people by the time you finish your PhD? And I don't think we have an answer, so have to keep talking to more people to see what we can come up with. But importantly, if you fast forwarded and you missed the episode, she was very kind, and she actually walked through the roadmap that nationally in Australia a group of nurses and midwives have developed for that transition zone, that postdoc period. And she's going to send me the link to their roadmap. But I will put it in as a chapter, so look at the description so that you can listen to that bit of how they found the major challenges in order to overcome, to build more researchers who are non-medics, specifically around nursing and midwifery. Last takeaway, and I loved this, is that in order for nurse researchers or nurses who do research or whatever you want to call yourself to have success, we need to create a degree of FOMO around nursing research. And it's something I've been thinking about quite a lot, is the branding around nurse research. And how are we, those of us who are doing research as nurses, how are we changing the perceptions, changing the options that students think about when they're going through nursing? How are we being visible so that more nurses want to do research, that it becomes the cool thing? It becomes the cool thing, not just for nurses to do, but that hospital CEOs and administrators and medics and funders actually, they want a nurse researcher, rather than us being the ones who are trying to pull up the chair to our table. That actually, how can we flip that and rebrand us ourselves as nurse researchers so that we become that object of desire and create that atmosphere of FOMO around nurse research. Right. My brain is buzzing. It was a very early morning recording because of the time difference between Australia and the UK. But I'm so glad that we made that conversation happen, and I know I'll definitely be enjoying listening to this one again because there was so much packed in it. So yeah, remember, if you have a question for Nick or Dr. Nicola Straiton, leave it in the YouTube section, comment section, because it's the guaranteed way that I'll see it and I'll find it because of how social media works. If I don't get tagged in it, I might not see the question, and I can then direct it to her if you have a specific question for her. Thanks so much for listening, and until the next 3 weeks, keep asking why.